What if I told you that the greatest king in history watched his own funeral while he was still alive? He could hear them crying. He could feel the embalmers touching his skin, but he couldn't move a single muscle to scream.
Alexander the Great, the undefeated warrior, might have been fully conscious, completely aware, as his own people prepared him for burial.
So I want you to picture this. We're in Babylon, the absolute center of an empire that stretches all the way from Greece to India. Alexander is only 32 years old, and he's conquered basically the entire known world. He's not just a king. To a lot of people, he's a living god. And then, just like that, it all starts to fall apart.
To really understand what could have happened, you've got to look at the timeline of his last brutal illness. So let's break down those final 12 days.
Okay, so it starts with a fever after a big party. Totally normal, right? But within a week, he can't even speak. By day 10, he's paralyzed. And just 2 days after that, the most powerful man on the planet is declared dead. This incredibly fast and frankly bizarre decline is what has kept people guessing for centuries.
All right, so the most obvious explanation, the one you go to first, is that Alexander just got really unlucky and fell victim to a common killer of the ancient world. Let's look at the prime suspects.
For a long, long time, historians have pretty much landed on two major diseases, typhoid and malaria. I mean, both were everywhere in Babylon. And the symptoms, the high fever, the growing weakness, they do seem to match up. It's a very plausible, if kind of tragically boring, end for such an incredible life.
And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's wild to think that one mosquito bite, one sip of bad water, could have shattered an empire and totally changed the course of history. But what if it wasn't chance at all?
Which brings us to our second, and let's be honest, much juicier theory, that Alexander wasn't just sick, he was murdered. And when you really look at the situation in Babylon, you realize there was a whole line of people who might have wanted Alexander out of the picture. His generals were completely burned out from years of war. The army had already straight up mutinied. And here's the big one. One of his most powerful generals, a guy named Antipater, probably thought he was being called to Babylon to be executed. So yeah, the motive was definitely there.
And get this, several ancient writers lay out a super specific plot. It's basically a family affair. Antipater, the mastermind, sends the poison with his son Cassander. Cassander then gives it to his other son, Iallus, who just happens to be Alexander's personal cupbearer, to slip him the fatal drink. It's a story of betrayal at the absolute highest level.
And the weapon they supposedly used, it is pure legend. They called it Styx water, a poison, so deadly, so corrosive, the story goes it could only be carried in a mule's hoof. Now, that sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but modern science has this fascinating twist. It turns out the local geology could have supported colonies of highly toxic bacteria, making this crazy legend, well, surprisingly plausible. But hey, if mythical river water isn't your thing, toxicologists have another idea: white hellebore. It's a plant they actually used for medicine back then, but if you overdose, it causes symptoms that sound a lot like what Alexander went through, especially the bad stomach pain and muscle weakness. So, a poison plot is still very much on the table.
So that brings us to our third possibility. In just the last few years, modern science has thrown a whole new theory into the mix. One that completely reframes this mystery and brings us right back to that terrifying question we started with.
Okay, this might be the single weirdest clue in the whole case. The ancient historian Plutarch wrote that Alexander's body didn't decompose for 6 whole days, even in the blistering heat of Babylon. Back then, his followers took it as proof that he was a god. But modern medicine? Well, it has a much, much more chilling explanation.
It's a condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS. It's this really rare disorder where your own immune system basically gets confused, turns on your body, and starts attacking your nerves.
Now, let's see how this all connects. GBS causes a paralysis that moves up the body, from the feet up, exactly like what was described for Alexander. It can leave your mind perfectly clear, totally lucid, but trapped inside a body that can't move. And here's the kicker. It can slow a person's breathing and lower their body temperature so much that to anyone else, they would look dead. And of course, if he wasn't actually dead, his body wouldn't have started to decay, would it?
This leads to a conclusion that is almost too horrifying to think about. Alexander the Great might not have been a god whose body defied nature. He might have just been a man.
a living, breathing, thinking man who is simply unable to move or speak, as his generals pronounced him dead and started carving up his empire.
So you've got disease, you've got poison, and you've got a terrifying medical error. 3 really compelling theories, but they all smash into the same giant brick wall.
See, there's only one way to ever know the truth, and that's with an autopsy. But to do that, you need the body. And that, my friends, opens up a whole other mystery, the story of Alexander's lost tomb.
Seriously, the journey his body took after he died is a movie in itself. We aren't just talking about a hearse. We're talking about a massive carriage made of solid gold, pulled by 64 mules. It was supposed to go back home to Macedonia, but his general Ptolemy hijacked it, literally kidnapped the corpse in the middle of the desert, and dragged it to Egypt just to legitimize his own rule. Once it was in Alexandria, the tomb became the ultimate tourist attraction for Roman emperors. Julius Caesar visited it and actually wept. But Augustus? That's the wildest story. Historical accounts say he leaned in to touch the mummy and accidentally broke off Alexander's nose. Then you had the mad emperor Caligula, who was so obsessed he actually stole Alexander's breastplate right out of the coffin to wear it himself. But then, around the 4th century AD, after wars, riots, and massive earthquakes, the tomb was sealed up and just vanished. To this day.
So after all of that, where does that leave us? We're back to our 3 main possibilities: a natural, tragic death from disease, a classic assassination with poison, or the modern, absolutely chilling theory of Guillain-Barré syndrome, the buried alive theory.
Without a body, without that key piece of evidence, this has to be one of the most fascinating and frustrating cold cases in all of human history. Every theory sounds plausible, but not a single one can be proven.
And that's where I want to turn it over to you. After hearing all the evidence, what's your gut feeling? Do you think it was just a tragic illness? A brilliant, sneaky conspiracy? Or do you think it was the most horrific possibility of all, a medical mistake with unimaginable consequences? I really want to know what you think. Drop your theory in the comments below. We'd love to see your take on history's ultimate cold case. Thanks for diving into this with us.